During the course of my presidency, I made climate change a top priority because I believe that for all the challenges that we face, this is the one that will define the contours of this century more dramatically perhaps than any other. No nation, whether it's large or small, rich or poor, will be immune from the impacts of climate change. We're already experiencing it in America, where some cities are seeing floods on sunny days, where wildfire seasons are longer and more dangerous, where in our Arctic state, Alaska, we're seeing rapidly eroding shorelines and glaciers that are receding at a pace that is unseen in modern times. Over my 8 years in office, we dramatically increased our generation of clean energy. We acted dramatically to curtail our use of dirty energy, and we invested in energy efficiency across the board. In Paris, working with people like Matteo, we helped to lead the world to the first significant global agreement for a low-carbon future. But here's the thing, even if every country somehow puts the brakes on the emissions that exist today, climate change would still have an impact on our world for years to come. Our changing climate is already making it more difficult to produce food. We've already seen shrinking yields and spiking food prices that in some cases are leading to political instability. And when most of the world's poor work in agriculture, the stark imbalances that we've worked so hard to close between developed and developing countries will be even tougher to close. The costs will be borne by people in poor nations that are least equipped to handle it. In fact, some of the refugee flows into Europe originate not only from conflict, but also from places where there are food shortages that will get far worse as climate change continues. So, if we don't take the action necessary to slow and ultimately stop these trends, the migration that has put such a burden on Europe already will just continue to get worse. Now, the good news is that there are steps we can take that will make a difference. In the United States, we have been able to bring our emissions down even as we grow our economy. The same is true in many parts of Europe. And there is an added bonus to acting on climate change because our existing food system is, in fact, a significant contributor to climate change. Food production is the second leading driver of greenhouse gas emissions, second only to energy production. And if we don't change course, the World Bank predicts that by 2050, agriculture and land use change may account for as much as 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. But as I said, we have already identified ways in which we can address this challenge. We know it's possible. Emissions from food production and agriculture are still growing significantly, and with the world's population expected to reach 9 billion by the middle of the century, now is the time for us to act. The path to a sustainable food future will require unleashing the creative power of our best scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs, backed by public investment and private investment to deploy new innovations and climate-smart agriculture. Better seeds, better storage, crops that grow with less water, crops that grow in harsher climates, mobile technologies that put more agricultural data, including satellite imagery and weather forecasts and market prices, into the hands of farmers so that they know when to plant and where to plant, what to plant, and how it will sell. All these things can help to make sure that food security exists in poor countries, but it can also help us assure that in producing the food that we need to feed the billions of people on this planet, that we're not destroying the planet in the process. Now, part of this is also going to be wasting less food, especially in the United States, where we can waste up to 40%, especially when nearly 800 million men, women, and children worldwide face the injustice of chronic hunger and malnutrition. We have to create a food culture that encourages a demand for healthier, more sustainable food. Sam was a leader in this, working with my wife Michelle in their Let's Move program. And in fact, by working with schools, businesses, and local leaders across America, Let's Move actually helped bring down America's obesity rates for our youngest kids for the first time in 30 years. In fact, making sure people have healthy food to eat alleviates a lot of the medical costs that we're seeing increasing in the advanced world. And if we are able to reduce our healthcare costs, that in turn will put the ability for us to divert those resources into further relieving poverty in many parts of the world. When families get the nourishment that they need, we see education outcomes rise, we see healthcare costs fall, we see economic activity improve, and when in the United States the #1 disqualifier for military service is obesity, we might even be able to strengthen our security as well. So the good news is that because of the work of many of you, the innovations that you are already investing in, we're starting to see a better way to feed a growing planet, combat hunger and malnutrition, put healthy food on the table, save our environment. And none of this is impossible. We can look at the successes that we've already made. In just the past decade, the number of undernourished people in the world is down by more than 160 million. Think about the achievements of the Green Revolution, which put hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. If you look at microfinance, an area where my mother devoted herself in developing nations, rural poor have been empowered. If you look at the expansion of education, especially for girls, the power of vaccines to eliminate smallpox, to reduce the incidence of measles and pneumonia. We've saved lives of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. You look at the progress we've made with HIV/AIDS, which has brought us to the point where we can, for the first time, imagine the real possibility of an AIDS-free generation. All this tells us that if we seize the future, there's nothing we cannot do. I do not believe that any part of the world has to be condemned to perpetual poverty and hunger. And I do not believe that this planet is condemned to ever-rising temperatures. I believe these are problems that were caused by man, and they can be solved by man. We can unleash the change that reduces hunger and malnutrition. We can spark the growth that will release nations from poverty, and we can reverse the tides of climate change and usher in a smarter and more sustainable world. And I'm found quoting the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who believed that there is such a thing as being too late. When it comes to climate change, the hour is almost upon us. If we act boldly and swiftly, if we set aside our parochial interests in favor of the air that our young people will breathe and the food that they will eat and the water that they will drink, if we think about them and their hopes and dreams, then we will act, and it won't be too late. And we can leave behind a world that is worthy of our children, where there's reduced conflict and greater cooperation, a world marked not by human suffering, but by human progress. That is what we have to work on together. And when I listen to Morgan in the introduction, it's young people like her in particular that give me great confidence that we will succeed. So with that, what I'd like to do now is to start our conversation, and I want to introduce to you a great friend, a very good chef, although I have to say that he admits that in Milan he may not be the best chef, that there are better chefs in the audience here today. Mr. Sanchez, please welcome Mr. Sanchez.
State tutti bene? See? Bravo. Okay.
That's all the Italian he knows.
That's it. After that, it's only curse words, so it gets, I can say no more.